Thanks so much for hanging out with us again. It's another edition of The Winning Ticket. I am Gino Bacola along with Eric from ETOF21 Sports. Eric, last week I was sick and out of commission. A couple weeks ago you were traveling, so we are now back together for another installment. And I'm excited to talk about all the sports happening this weekend, everything going on in the world of sports. That's what's fun about this particular show that is presented by DRF Sportsbook. You want to make sure that if you are in the state of Iowa, you sign up right now for a DRF Sportsbook account. You see that promo code flashing across the bottom of your screen, FAST150. That will give you a $150 deposit match bonus. So, Eric, we'll talk some MLB. For me, on the weekend look ahead, I'll have some horse racing. I believe you have NASCAR and UFC, right?
Correct.
And then we'll finish up talking some NFC East. So we'll preview the Cowboys, the Eagles. We'll talk Giants. We'll talk Commanders and how we may look at playing that division. We are only a few weeks away from the start of the NFL season, man. It's getting close.
Crazy to think. I think we're a week away from
college.
Football. Yep.
From the first
week 0.
Games getting started. So let's rock and roll. Eric, I have 2 baseball plays for tonight. I think you have a couple more, right? So let's have you start off with the baseball plays. And let's start with your first play. You have 2 plays in the same game, right? You're going to be playing the first 5 innings and then the full game in one game tonight?
I'm taking the Nationals plus the 150 and plus for the first 5 and plus 170 for the game. Look, one of the angles I like doing is fading someone after they pitched a no-hitter. Lorenzen from the Phillies pitched a no-hitter last game. Oddly enough, against these Nationals, Phillies are batting .220 over the last 7 days. They're only averaging 2.7 runs per game. Nationals, like I said, just faced Lorenzen, who threw a no-hitter, so they just saw him. Also, that was his high of pitches thrown for the year, 124 most of the season, 34 more than his average of 90.9 per game. So I'm expecting his arm to be a little bit tired. I think the Nationals are going to be able to get to him. You look at the Nationals for the last 7 days, they're batting .282. They're averaging 6.2 runs per game. So they've actually been hitting pretty good the last 7 days. For the year, they have the 13th best batting average against right-handed pitchers. So I'm going to take the Nationals in the fade spot, plus the 150 for the first 5 and plus 170 for the game.
Couple different plays in the game for Eric. If you want to jump on board with him for the first 5 or for the full game, you can get some nice value there at plus money. Eric, you have 2 more plays in the same game. I'll take a swing at one of my plays. First, I'm going to be looking at the Brewers tonight, plus 100. We have Woodruff. He was on the DL for 60 days on the IL, and now he's just making his 3rd start back. And what I like is that he's shown great progression. Those first 2 starts, 5 innings, first time out. They didn't want to ask too much of him in his first start back. Then in his second start back, he went up to 7 innings pitched. And now I think he's probably about as close to ready to really, really go as he's been all year. And he's going to be facing Heaney. Keep in mind, Heaney only pitched into the 2nd inning in his last start because he was sick the entire week before that start. So his whole preparation was backed up. And I think he may be a little behind. And at the moment, Eric, because Woodruff has only started 4 times this year, he still had I don't think the odds have quite adjusted to him yet. You're still able to get plus money on him in this situation, and he's fantastic. I'm going to go Brewers plus the 100 in here. I'm going to go Woodruff as, I'm going to play that matchup, lean Woodruff against.
It's a nice bounce back spot. They're coming off a tough series against your Dodgers. So it's
and the Dodgers are playing really well right now, and that leads us into your next play, right? You have a couple plays in that Dodger game.
Yeah, I'm taking Mookie Betts over 1.5 bases at plus 110. Last 7 days, he's batting a robust .529. He's really been seeing the ball well. Has the 4th most hits in MLB during that time frame as well. For his career against the Marlins pitcher, he has a .455 batting average, 500 on base percentage, slugging percentage at .818. So he really hits Sandy really that well. 2nd most hits on the Dodgers against right-handed pitchers. Also in the same game, I'm taking Freddie Freeman over 1.5 bases at plus 105. Sandy's given up the 5th most hits against left-handed batters this season. Freeman leads the Dodgers in hitting righties, batting 328. Also, his career batting average is 328 against this Marlins pitcher. So I'm just going to play the total base props of Freeman and Mookie Betts. And
they've been so much fun to watch. And Freddie, like the Dodgers announcers just sort of laugh right now with Freddie Freeman. He's in that kind of a stretch. Like he just comes up and you just know he's going to hit a double, a gapper. He's just going to find the hole anywhere they're going. So what's interesting, you lean on a couple over total bases props. I'm going to play against the Dodgers, but only for the first 5 innings. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to try to ride Alcantara in just the first time or two through the lineup. Because I think getting that third time through the lineup still might be tough for him against a good Dodgers team. And the Dodgers overall are just a better team. But I can get plus money basically on Alcantara versus Gonsolin here.
Yeah,
that's basically what I've tried to do. I've tried to turn this into a Alcantara versus Gonsolin matchup for 5 innings, and I'm going to get plus 104 on this. Alcantara's last 4 games, 32 innings pitched. He's given up 20 hits and 6 earned runs. He had 1 bad game, really, and the other 3 were fantastic. He has a 1.69 ERA and a 1.75 batting average against. Tony G's last 5 in 27 innings, he's given up 26 hits, 9 walks, 17 earned runs, 5 home runs, a 5.67 ERA, and a 2.65 batting average against. His numbers this year overall are actually even better than he's been. He's struggled. He's gotten a little bit of like luck when there have been batters on. He's always been that kind of a guy who can strand some, but he just hasn't been great this year. So I'll hope that Dodgers are down early, and then Mookie and Freddie with some big knocks late. Eric gets over the total bases. I can get Miami the first 5. We can both pick up some money in that Dodgers-Miami game a little bit later on tonight. So just 2 plays for me, 4 plays for you, but you have 2 plays in each of these 2 games for tonight, right?
Right. Correct.
Okay, Eric, let's move on to the weekend. Good luck to everyone in your baseball plays for tonight. We have the weekend look ahead now. I have 3 races that I'm going to be looking at, and you have a race and a UFC matchup. So I'm going to go first with the Saratoga race, and I'm going to take a look at Saratoga for Saturday. It's going to be race number 7, and I'm going to look at the number 4, Tax Implications, who is 5-1 on the morning line. Sometimes you're looking at a particular race, and it just feels like it's the right horse in the right spot that's going to get the right sort of setup, the right trip, and be the right price. To me, it kind of all comes together for Tax Implications in this race. It's the Lake Placid. It's a grade 2 stakes race, and it's for 3-year-old fillies. There is a lot of speed in this race. Heavenly Sunday is an early speed type. Glorious Princess is an early speed type. You have Soviet Excess, who wants to sit close. Prerequisite, forwardly placed, and surge capacity. All of them want to be close up. And you have Tax Implications, who's really more of a closer, wants to take back, wants to make 1 late run. And so that's what she's going to hope in here, that they go quick early, because she's one of the few true closers in here. It's probably her and Esprit. And what's nice is that Tax Implications will probably be better value than Esprit, and Tax Implications is now going to go 3rd start off the layoff. She should be ready for her best race. It's kind of like what I was talking about with Woodruff, right? He's coming back. He's making his 3rd start back off that long layoff. So you just figure they'll be fitter. They're building up that stamina level. I'm expecting the best effort in her career. If that's good enough to win at anything over 7-2, that's my value line with her. I need at least 7-2 or above on Tax Implications. 7th race on Saturday, the number 4, Tax Implications. Eric, we go from racing, the horse racing world, to racing in the NASCAR world. You have a matchup, a head-to-head that you're going to play in NASCAR this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to be fading Chase Elliott here, just because we're getting to the part of the season where he needs to win to get in the playoffs. He was injured, was suspended for a race. This was one of the guys with Chase Elliott that was expected to win the NASCAR Cup Championship Series. And just like any other sport, when these guys with high expectations need to win, I look to fade them. And I'm getting plus money with Kyle Larson. Larson has won this race at Watkins Glen back-to-back years. He has 4 top 10 finishes in his last 410 races here. This is one of his better tracks, and I'm getting plus money over.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
It's because Elliott needs to win the race. Elliott's kind of like the Lakers, the Dodgers, the Cowboys. He's one of the more popular racers on the circuit. And everyone has this false analogy that Elliott is one of the better road races. This is a road course, so there's more turns, a little bit longer track, not the constant circle. Everyone has this constant image that Elliott is this elite road course racer. He has not won a road course race since August of 2021. Flip side, he has only led 8 laps in the road course races this year. So as much as everyone wants to make Elliott this elite level racer on road courses, it's a little bit miscued. He's not having that good of a season. He's not running in road courses that good. I'm going to fade the driver that needs to win. I'm going to take Larson at plus money on his best course just to finish over Elliott at plus 125.
A little head-to-head matchup there for Eric, sniffing out some value and also able to fade there on Elliott. Let's move to Del Mar Saturday for my next horse racing play. I'm going to be looking at the Del Mar Oaks. It's the feature on Saturday. It's a grade 1 race. It's going to go as race number 8. And there's a filly in here that I really like. She's the number 2. Her name is Window Shopping. She's 6-1 on the morning line. She's raced 4 times in her career. She's won 2 of them. The 2 races she didn't win, she had brutal trouble trips there. And so in all of her races, she's shown ability. You know, she has talent. She tried the grass in her first start, and it was one of the worst races worst racing luck races you'll ever see. She got bounced around out of the gate. She got pinballed. The whole race, she was just stuck in traffic. She was in between horses. She never had a chance. It was one of those frustrating races to watch if you bet her. And then she came right back, and she was so impressive winning in her next start. This filly has class. And it's a wide open race. So I think she will be in that 5-1 range. She's 6-1 on the morning line. So she should offer you really nice value. The number 2, Window Shopping, in race number 8 at Del Mar on Saturday. She's 6-1 on the morning line. If we can get anything 4-1 or above, I think that's fair value and worthy of a few bucks there. So I've got one more play. That's going to be on Sunday. You're going to head to UFC for your next play, right, Eric?
I'm heading to UFC, which is Saturday night. Absolute stacked fight card, but I'm going to the main event. I'm taking Sterling to win inside the distance at plus 110. Look, that means I'm getting plus money on a fighter that's minus 200 to win via knockout, via submission, which is possible. Granted, O'Malley is going to have the advantage standing up. Sterling is very unorthodox with his fighting stance, and he's got a huge advantage in the grappling game. I think he's going to be able to get this to the ground, use his leg kicks to set it up, get him to the ground, and then he's either going to win by ground and pound or win by submission. I can get plus money to cover either, so I'm going to take Sterling in to win inside the distance at plus 110.
Plus 110, Sterling to win in the distance. So, Eric, you have a few baseball plays for tonight, a few look-ahead plays for this weekend. I'm going to finish up talking about a race on Sunday. It's actually a huge day up at Woodbine. It's what they call the King's Plate. It used to be called the Queen's Plate. It's the Canadian version of the Kentucky Derby. So it's for all the Canadian-bred horses. There's a field of 17 horses that are lining up for this race. So it's one of those awesome betting races. They have an all-stakes pick 5. So from races 6 through 10, all stakes races, there's a pick 5 sequence that ends with this race, and you can
Isn't there pick 5 at 20 cent?
Yep, you can. I was just going to say that you can play it for 20 cents, so you can really spread out and use a few extra. I like this filly. She's a filly. She's going to be facing the boys in here. Her name is Wickenheiser. She was second in the Woodbine Oaks, and I've been following her for a while. She has no problem with distance. She's just a stone cold closer. She got in a little bit of trouble early on, and that was the difference between winning and finishing second. Now, with a little more distance in a big field like this, with the likelihood of a few more horses wanting to go early and push the pace, I think it sets up really well for Wickenheiser, the number 8, 12-1 on the morning line. My line on her would be 8. Anything at 8-1 and above, totally fine with playing her. Wickenheiser, make sure to throw her in your pick fives, put a few bucks to win on her, especially if it's Sunday, middle of the day, and you've had a rough weekend so far. You know, you don't need to put much to get back on a nice 12-1 shot like that on Sunday
that's
evening.
ROI right there. 12, and get 12-1. Now, let me ask you this. Is there like a chalk that we should look to play an exacta with?
You know what's funny? In this particular race, there's not even really a chalk because it is such a big field. Stanley House is 4-1 on the morning line. Stanley House actually has Javier Castellano coming in to ride. Javier, who won the Derby this year and the Belmont on 2 different horses. Elysian Field is the filly who won the Woodbine Oaks. She's for Mark Casse. She's a big-time player in there. She'll be one of the top contenders. And then another one is Kalik. She's trained by Chad Brown. Kalik has been running over at Belmont and at Gulfstream. So while a lot of these horses might have been at Woodbine and maybe facing other horses up in Canada, Kalik's been facing the best horses so far. So he will be favored most likely in this field, but wow, it is such a fun race. You can make cases for so many, like 8, 10, 12-1 shots all throughout. One of the more fun horses' names in the race is Kaukokaipu, which means wanderlust. It means to have a feeling of longing for a place that you didn't know existed. I went down a rabbit hole, like looking up the definition for this term because I thought it was really cool. We don't even have an actual word for it in the English language. So fun Sunday.
One more quick question. Sorry,
please,
man.
Bring them at me.
Is there like a local jockey that's in the race that we should look target?
Good call. So some of the local jockeys who are really successful and may fly under the radar like throughout the day when some of the bigger jocks come in. So the Kimura is one of the best, and he is actually on Kalik, who will probably be favored in that race. So you definitely want to keep an eye on him. But Hernandez, who is on Wickenheiser now. Kimura was on Wickenheiser. Kimura is going to now leave and go ride Kalik, which anybody would go ride Kalik, who's going to be the favorite for Chad Brown. But Hernandez is one of those local Woodbine jockeys who's so good always up at the top of the jockey standings now and hitting it around 20% or so. So in some of these stakes races, Hernandez is someone who's good, who's local, who knows that track, and who may be kind of a little bit under the radar on the national scene. So, yeah, really good questions for some of the folks out there who may be watching. Maybe you're not necessarily someone who plays horse racing all the time, but it will be fun on Sunday to kick back and watch some really big racing up at Woodbine for the King's Plate. Okay, Eric, let's move to the future, but not that far in the future, man. Football season is getting closer and closer. Let's talk about the NFC East. I'm going to pull up the betting odds looking at DRF Sportsbook, and we'll talk Eagles, Cowboys, Giants, Commanders. I do have to say, of all of the divisions that we've discussed so far, this one for me is probably one that I may have like the least amount of future plays on it, because I do think it on paper does feel like it's going to be pretty chalky. Like I'm not all that excited about playing the Giants to win the division. I think they can have a fine season, but they would be the only team as far as value is concerned that would make sense to me, Eric. I don't like playing short price favorites in a future like this. If you're going to have your money tied up for a long period of time, I at least want it to be tied up for a good price, a good piece of value. You can play minus 110 every week all the time. Yeah. So unless you really, really feel like you love the Eagles, to me, I wouldn't want to play the Eagles necessarily to win the division, even though they are the most likely winners of the division. let's talk Eagles, and I'm going to pull up the prices. Eric, start with the Philadelphia Eagles, your NFC champion from last year.
First of all, I absolutely love Jalen Hurts. You just listen to his story, how he grew up, went to Alabama, Kiffin left, Saban didn't want him, went through all the stuff he had to deal with there. Then he went to Oklahoma, got them to the semifinals, drafted by Philly. Players on Philly didn't want him, leads him to a Super Bowl. Kid's just a plugger. He's a player. Coach's son, absolutely love him. And I'll give the coaching staff credit. They did a great job of putting a system around him that allows him to succeed. Rush-based attack, and because their offensive line is so good, they're able to use different schemes. They use the power scheme, use the RPO, use inside zone, use outside zone. So there's constantly different blocking schemes that they're able to attack the defensive front, and it's all centered around that elite rushing game. Obviously, no Miles Sanders. They bring in Rashad Penny from Seattle and DeAndre Swift from my Lions. Two-headed monster, which is really good. Plus, they have Kenneth Gainwell. It's looking like Gainwell is going to be the back in the 2-minute offense. It's one of those things where if someone goes down, look, you got a great player with the Eagles. But I really think it's just going to be a constant cycle. So in terms of fantasy, I really don't want anything to do with anyone in the running game.
Could be aggravating. Like if we see throughout the year there start to become like a real hierarchy, then we'll change. Or if there's an injury or two, and then it's just one of these guys left standing. But even then, it's tough because you could be getting all the looks, and then Jalen Hurts could get the touchdown.
Yeah, it could kind of like what was going on with Detroit last year. Come all the way down to the 5, then Jamal Williams gets the touchdown.
Exactly. Yep.
In terms of the passing game, guys on the outside, a lot of these teams run the same stuff in this division. The more we talk about it, 2 guys on the outside going deep flies, a lot of stuff underneath, crossing routes, hitches, comebacks. Brian Johnson, he's going to be the OC, first-year play caller. I'm always a little apprehensive about these first-year play callers.
And they have him on both sides this year, on the OC and the DC.
The thing about Johnson, though, is he actually was the high school quarterback for Jalen Hurts' dad. So he's known Jalen since Jalen was a young guy. So they have that relation. Maybe Jalen, if stuff isn't going so well or running different things that isn't working, Jalen can speak up. But I'm always just, we don't know how someone who's never called plays is going to operate when the game plan goes to crap and you have to do stuff on the fly.
Because some people are good, really are better in that situation than you would expect, but most people are not.
No, not at all. And then also playing with pace, slowing it down, when to go fast, trying to get that extra possession before half. Just kind of stuff like that. How is he going to do that? Does Sirianni, does he come in? Does he have to start like kind of helping him out there? It's kind of something to monitor. Also, Eagles are one of the most analytical teams in the NFL. Offensive line. Historically, they've had one of the better offensive lines, and it's like that this year. But the one thing is this. They don't have as much depth. A lot of the backups from last year have gone on to different teams. Now they're in the starter positions. If this team starts to get banged up on the offensive line, they're not going to be able to fill and play like they've done in years past.
And also, to kind of piggyback what you're saying, their last year and maybe even 2 years ago, they were a little bit more veterans all around. Now, in some of these spots, like right there on the offensive line, and then also on the defensive line, they're going to be filling in with either rookies or younger players who could absolutely step up and fill in fine, but they're not proven. Right? Just like you're saying with the play caller. So we got to see 1 or 2 spots on the offensive line has to prove it. 1 or 2 spots on the defensive line has to prove it. They did lose a couple linebackers, couple safeties, players that were impactful last year. So they still, to me, feel like one of the better teams, but I do think their margin for error is a lot smaller this year. They're not as deep, and it doesn't feel like, the first year or 2 that you are a good team, you want to win and beat everybody. Yeah. And then it sort of shifts, right? Does this team care about winning 14 games this year, or are they fine if they win 11 games and they're completely healthy come playoff time?
I mean, I lean to the latter.
Yeah.
You mentioned the DC. They have a new one coming up. Sean Desai comes from the Fangio coaching tree. he's going to keep everything the same, but obviously the big focus is going to be stopping the run. That was the one thing that the Eagles really struggled at last year until they added Sue about week 8, week 9 last year. They drafted Jalen Carter, but something to remember with Carter is there is a reason he slipped to 10. He had the off the field issue. Is he going to be suspended? Is he going to miss time? We really don't know. And is he going to be able to be as dominant clogging up the middle? We really don't know, because there's going to be a big uptick in the quality of offensive linemen that he's gone against. Another thing the Eagles need to do is they don't blitz that much. They need to be able to create pressure. And that's one of my worries with Desai. Is if he's just chilling there and Team X is able to go up and down the field, is he going to pressure, start blitzing a little bit more, put the defense in an uncomfortable situation because they're at the bottom third of the league in blitzing? Also, you have the trend of a team after they go to the Super Bowl hitting that under. And let's face it, it looked for sure like the Bengals were going to hit their under last year, but they went on that insane winning streak to end the season. I would lean to the under, but you just kind of look at it, it's heavily juiced. And you made a great comment. Why, with how you can play week to week, why are you going to like bet an under at -140? Like, that's not fun. No one wants to do that. I'll just kind of wait. I'll play this team week to week, try to find a little value and just kind of go from there. Also, one more thing with them is they have one of the better punters with Jake Elliott. So when he's kicking, it's kind of hard. You know, you can count on him. You count on Elliott, Butler, and Tucker. Those 3 guys are the ones that
I don't really have many knocks on them overall. It's just like we're saying, I just don't think they're going to be quite as deep. And if they get hurt in a few spots, they have new coordinator on both sides. That might take a little while to get things figured out. Maybe Hurts doesn't have quite as efficient of a year as he did last year, and that just regresses a little bit to the mean. So if those things happen, they could be, I still think they're probably in the 11, 12-ish range, but I just don't know what to play for them because they have a good defense and because they are in a weak NFC. So that's why I don't really want to play dead against them, because they may not even need to be fantastic to win a lot of games. They just might be more talented than a lot of the teams they play because they're still really well-rounded on both lines. And that's one thing that they have that not many teams do is they're good on both offensive and defensive line. Even though they're not as deep, they're still top 5 in the league, probably on both sides.
And when I just look at starters, I don't look at depth because you can go down the whole rabbit hole.
Exactly, you're right.
They're easily top 5. They also got Nolan Smith, another guy from Georgia. He did get hurt last night in the Browns game. They had like 3 injuries in the Browns game. A DB got hurt and a backup wide receiver. So it's just something to watch. We've kind of seen this with the Chiefs over the years. The better you get, because these players are going to want more money, and rightfully so because they are winning, it puts more pressure on the front office to hit these home runs with the draft picks. And with how good Philly has been with trades now, there's this whole I don't want to trade with Philly because I don't want Howie to make me look bad thing going on in the NFL now too, just because Howie's been so great getting the trades in the draft and drafting the right player. I don't know. Not as deep, still electric, one of the better rosters, probably the best roster in the NFC. They're going to make the playoffs in my eyes unless something goes awry.
But, they do have a tough...
if they get a hiccup and I can get like a 10-1 to win the Super Bowl, that's what I'm in. But right now, no value in my eyes.
And, you look at weeks coming off the bye, they play at Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, at Dallas, at Seattle, Giants. That's 6 games in a row against teams that made the playoffs last year. That's a tough little stretch for them. But yeah, they do look like the team to beat in the NFC, definitely in the NFC East. As we move along to the Dallas Cowboys, so they are the second choice in this division. Eric, the Cowboys over under like 9.5 wins or so. And for Dallas, they have had back-to-back years where they've had 12 wins and they've made the playoffs. But this is a team that has not reached the NFC Championship since 1995.
No.
Since 95. Mike McCarthy will now be calling plays. He has not called plays since 2018. Keep in mind, that was for the Packers. They had a top 5 scoring offense 7 of his 13 years. But remember, Adam Gase looked really good with Peyton Manning. And it's different when you have a quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers that McCarthy had. I don't think Dak is quite that guy. This team's defense, though, is fantastic. They were second in pass rush grade last year. They bring in Gilmore to the secondary to put with Diggs. So now you're strong up front. You're strong in the back. And they even added in the middle, Eric, too, which was one of their weaknesses last year. It's stopping the run. So defensively, they're really, really solid. Where I have questions for them is going to be on the offensive side of the ball. Because now, what version of Dak are we going to see? He's going to have a new offensive coordinator or a new play caller with McCarthy. And their offensive line, if they stay completely healthy, they're good. But they're getting a little older. Tyron Smith has only played 15 out of 34 eligible games over the last 2 years. Steele is coming off a torn ACL that required surgery. So those are both of their starting tackles that we have question marks and concerns about before the season even starts. So now on the offense, quarterback has to prove it because last year he struggled a little bit. He led the league in interceptions even though he missed 5 games. You have a new offensive scheme. You have an offensive line that doesn't have a whole lot of depth. And now, as far as the running backs are concerned, a lot of people like to pile on Ezekiel Elliott, Eric, but what's nice is that at least he would take some of the bumps and bruises, wear defense down, and then Pollard could break big runs, or they could get Pollard out wide and get creative with him. It's a little bit more difficult when you have to be the every down back. You could get worn down. And if you have sometimes 20, 25 touches, maybe later in the game or whenever you do break those runs, you may not have the same burst. So it might be a totally different type game for Pollard. He might be fine, but he's not a big guy, and this will be the first time he has this role.
Yeah. My worry with Pollard is this. Obviously, you mentioned it. There's a couple things. Number one, no more Kellen Moore. Moore is gone. He's in Los Angeles right now. Schottenheimer came in, but as you mentioned, McCarthy is calling the plays. McCarthy is going to be running a lot of vertical stuff, hence why you bring in Brandon Cooks. Now you have Cooks and Gallup on the outside, running flies, deep post. You have Lamb working the underneath. But by doing that, you're taking away Dak and the RPO, taking away. Now, it wasn't a big factor because running backs only averaged about 4 catches per game in the Kellen Moore offense. They average even less in the McCarthy offense. And there's just no check down. So that right there, that decreases Tony Pollard's value. Second thing, they switched offensive line coaches, and they're going from more of an outside zone to more of an inside zone. Now you have Tony Pollard, who's coming off touching the ball 200 times. First time in his career where he's gone over 200 touches. That's a lot of wear and tear on your body.
And now they're hoping for even more this year.
And he finished the season getting hurt. He had that injury in the San Francisco game. Also, there's no one else there. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, I know Dalvin Cook went to the Jets, what I think is an absolute pointless signing. But Dalvin Cook coming to Dallas, that made sense. Leonard Fournette coming here makes sense. Kareem Hunt coming here makes sense. They need someone else. I'm a little bit worried about that. So I bet the under 1050.5 yards rushing for Tony Pollard, just because the change in zone, McCarthy willing to throw the ball more, and there's no one else there. So I took that. Also, Solane, who's the coach for the offensive line coach, when you just look at his historical data, his teams have done better run blocking than pass blocking. So last year, Dak missed games, led the league in interceptions. If this line struggles to pass block, what is going to happen? You know what I mean? Like, are they going to be able to protect? I don't know. Like, is this going to lead to more pass interceptions if Dak is rushing through his progressions? So this team I'm a little worried about offensively, but defensively, they have a Super Bowl level defense. You have Micah
They're rock
Parsons
solid
and Armstead, who are able to get to the quarterback. With those two, it made sense. that the Cowboys led the league in pressure. Biggest weakness, it's going to sound familiar, stopping the run. They did draft Smith from Michigan, who's going to be in the front looking to clog that middle. But when you just have Diggs, Parsons, Lawrence, Armstrong, et cetera, you're going to win games because of your defense. The issue is,
they just can't lose games offensively, because that's what happened last year.
Stay healthy. Can Dak not turn over the ball? What happens if Pollard gets hurt? They lost Dalton Schultz. Is Jack Ferguson able to do stuff?
You said Jack Fitz. You were talking about our producer.
Yeah,
you were thinking of our producer.
I miss Jack. I'm going to talk to him in a couple of weeks. But there's so many questions offensively. And then they're bringing in a kicker from the USFL. I love the USFL. But they're bringing in a minor developmental type player who could be great. Don't get me wrong. He was great in the USFL to kick, just because Brett Meyer in the Tampa game almost cost him the game because he missed 4 field goals. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions here, a lot of area for concern. I'm probably going to fade Dallas in a lot of plays, and then a lot of games. And then I don't know if Dak doesn't throw many INTs to start the season, maybe look to take him to do that and an inflated number. But I'm out on the Dallas Cowboys this season.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be bad because of that defense, like you're saying. But I just don't think I need to see so much more from their offense before I can trust that they're ready to take another step and be more than just a make the playoff kind of team. Yep. So the Cowboys, Quinn sticks as the DC. He's been a head coaching candidate the last couple of years. Their defense led the league in takeaways for the second straight year last year. And Cooks was someone that you pointed out. He's super underrated. Cooks is past 1,000 yards 6 of the last 8 years. He's only been in the league 9 years. He's hit 1,000 in 6 of them. And he's quietly really, really good. He could be in a nice spot here in Dallas if he can link up with Dak. This team has 6 primetime games this year. They also have all their games against, they play the entire AFC East, which is not easy. That's 4 solid teams that you're playing, from New England, Miami, Buffalo, and the Jets. They also have games against the Chargers, the 49ers, the Lions, and Seattle. Not easy games there. So the schedule is not soft for Dallas. Eric, let's move along to the Giants. Strength for this team last year, leaning on the run. They brought in Coach Dable, and he completely flipped the team around. They won 5 more games than they did the year before, and this is a staff that seems to get the best out of their players, because this team wasn't really fantastic at anything last year. Like, they didn't have a dominant defense, or they didn't have a couple receivers that you could just throw it to every time. There was nothing that you could really lean on and say they were incredible there, but they ran the ball a lot. They would use Jones and Barkley to run the ball, and they just seemed like they didn't make a whole lot of mistakes a lot of the time, and they kind of forced the other teams to make a few more mistakes. That's the mark of a good staff, putting your team in position to succeed and your players in position to succeed. Now, defensively, the linebackers weren't great. The safeties were, one of the weaker. That defense has to get better overall. One place where I think they could get better is the offensive line, because they're young. Thomas took a big step forward. They also have Neal, who's going to be moving back to the left side. He played the right side as a rookie. I could see this offensive line getting better. And as long as Waller can stay close to healthy, they have to be better at tight end. The Giants ranked bottom 10 in receiving grade, in receptions, and in receiving yards in tight ends last year. In Waller, he's missed a lot of games the last 2 years because he's not been healthy. But if you can get back to 2019, 2020, he's wide receiver 1 for them, right, Eric? Because they don't have really a wide receiver 1. They have a few options that are kind of all 2s and 3s: Shepard, Slayton, Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder, Hodgins, Wan'Dale Robinson. You really like the rookie because what's interesting about the rookie, he may just be in a good spot where there are a bunch of slot receivers. He seems like he's one of the few that can actually play on the outside.
Correct. First of all, I gotta give Brian BD huge props. Outstanding coach. And people are gonna hate what I say, but he did everything he did to put Daniel Jones in a successful position, doing everything. Two guys on the outside running deep, stuff slot and tight end across the middle. And with Jalen Hyatt and Isaiah Hodgins, they're the only two outside guys. Both those guys are going to be on the field 80% of the time. So just by that alone, they're going to be getting volume. I saw 40-1 in some guy that's going to be on the field 80% of the time. In my eyes, you have to throw a quarter unit on that just to get the value. I know, obviously, Bijan Robinson, heavy favorite, rightfully so. But if he gets hurt and Hodgins is just racking up catches, racking up yards, that's going to be something we're going to look for. Another one, I like Isaiah Hodgins over 500.5 yards. To end the season, he had a 20% target share, averaging 5.5 targets, 5 receptions, 50 yards per game. And in the wild card game, really a must win against Minnesota, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 105, and 1 touchdown. With the relationship that Jones and Hodgins formed to close the season, the production he had to close the season, plus him getting 80% of the snaps, I'm in on Hodgins over 500.5 yards receiving. In terms of the running game, one thing to note, Barkley averaged about a yard less per game running out of the shotgun than he did under center. It's going to be interesting to see how the bowl goes with that. You mentioned the offensive line. They did bring in my boy JMS, the center from Minnesota. I think he's really going to do a good job quarterbacking that line, making sure stuff is easier for Neal. Hopefully Neal can make that jump to year 2 that they saw Thomas make. I think this line is young, real high ceiling if the young guys are able to take that step forward. Martindale's the DC. What does Martindale like to do? Blitz, 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 blitz. They're going to be blitzing. They're going to look to create pressure. Obviously, they did struggle against the run too. DFS-wise, teams that play the NFC East, these 3 teams we talked about, look to play against them with the opposing team's running back. The thing that makes me a little leery about betting this team, and now granted they're in the NFC isn't as strong as the AFC, so you can get behind the 8 ball and maybe make a push. Or if they get behind the 8 ball, maybe now we take them at a better odds to make the playoffs. But they're only home 4 games.
That's what's their schedule is scary
for 11 weeks. So
their schedule is really scary. 2 of the first 3 on the road. They have a trip west with San Francisco on a short week. Weeks 2 through 6, 4 out of 5 of those games are on the road. And then in weeks 9 through 11, 3 straight road games. They got to play at Philly on Monday on Christmas Day. The schedule isn't easy. And what makes me a little nervous is that last year was one of the years for them, like the ball bounced their way a lot. Right? They got the benefit of the doubt in a lot of games where you looked at the box score and was like, wow, they lost the head-to-head. They lost the yards. They lost the yards per play, right? But they would win on the margins. And a lot of times that's hard to sustain overall. But my counterpoint to that is I think that happens with teams that have really good coaching staffs. And I pointed this out when we were talking about the NFC East yesterday, Eric. So far, and it's way too early, but Brian Daboll reminds me a little bit of Vrabel in that I think he can make like average to below average players and just get the best out of them, put them in spots where they're succeeding, they're not failing, just coach them up as best as possible. I don't know if this team could win a Super Bowl. I don't think they could even win the division maybe, but what I do think is the number is low enough where I think I'm going to play their over wins. It's only 7.5. Like they could have a losing record. And so they were 9-7-1 last year. And this year they could even regress and still get over that in a weak NFC. The concern though is their schedule. What I need for this, like if you're someone that bets the Giants over, you really want to come out and be 2-0 to start the year. You play Dallas at home in week 1. Can you win that game at home? Because then in week 2, you go on the road and you play an Arizona team that you should be able to beat. So right off the bat, can you get a big win at home against a division rival and then get up 2 games? And then you play San Francisco on a short week, and that might look tough, but we think maybe their quarterback concerns, right? Maybe they haven't established something there yet. Maybe they aren't as dominant as they have been. Every time you win a game early, it's something that they can't take away from you, right? It's something that's in the books. So I'm going to go Giants. Let's hope they can get off to a good start. And those first couple games are just so crucial for them, in particular weeks 1 and 2. But I didn't have too many other plays in this division overall. Eric, did you have anything else you wanted to mention about the Giants before we move along to the Commanders?
Nope, just those 2 player props. For me, this is a real tough division. This is like a player prop division for me in terms of futures.
Washington's the long shot in the division. They have a win total of 6.5 for their over-under. Coach Ron Rivera, he hasn't had a winning season since 2017. They bring in Eric Bieniemy to be their offensive coordinator because he can slide right in if they choose to go in a different direction from head coach Ron Rivera. And they need some improvement on the offense. They were 24th in points per game last year, 20th in yards per game. As far as quarterbacks are concerned, they've had 12 different quarterbacks since 2018, the most in the NFL. And they're now going to be leaning on Sam Howell. They had the 3rd worst passing grade of all quarterbacks last year, but they did bring in Jacoby Brissett to help out. He could be a nice kind of veteran backup, and if Howell's not ready to go, he can fill in. They also have a strong defense. It's not surprising. They've drafted a lot of top-tier defensive talent through the years. It's a big year for Chase Young. He's on a contract year. He got hurt in 2021, and then he played the final 3 games of last year. He had that awesome rookie year. This team has 10 games on their schedule against teams that made the playoffs last year. They have an offensive line that is changing 4 starters between new acquisitions, and that's my biggest concern. That offensive line and the quarterbacking overall. They have a couple nice wide receivers, and they have a couple good running backs on the offensive side. Then on the defensive side, Eric, they're strong defensive front, and then the secondary was pretty good last year. So they have spots that you can point to and say, yeah, that could be a strength for them. That could be a strength for them. But if you don't have a quarterback, and if your offensive line isn't good or consistent, it doesn't matter how good your defense is. There's just only so much you can do.
I mean, first of all, Scotty Turner's finally gone.
That's positive.
Which is a big positive thing. I look at this, Eric Bieniemy comes in. The first thing I don't like is Ron Rivera in the press conference saying these players don't like how tough Bieniemy is on them. I mean, Jesus, dude. I mean, this is football, dude. He's coaching you. You're in your 20s or 30s. He's trying.
And you're not a winning. It'd be different. And I don't think this is a team would do this, but it'd be different if you were some winning team, right? And you had like an established winning culture, and he came in. Your team has been bad. Of course, he's going to come in and try to kick your butt.
Now, what he's going to do is he's going to do a lot of pre-snap motion. Why do coordinators do pre-snap motion with young quarterbacks? It makes it easier to read the defense, man, zone, where's the pressure coming from, stuff like that. A lot of pre-snap motion. I also believe they're going to use a lot of RPO. And the one player prop I wanted in this one was Sam Howell over rushing yards. This kid ran for over 800 yards at UNC his last year. Obviously, he was just named starter, so they have nothing posted. But I will say this. Week 1 DFS, Sam Howell is going to be in my lineup. Sam Howell rushing prop, week 1, I'm going to be bet just because I think in DFS, we need the rushing upside, and I don't think people are going to realize how electric of a rusher this kid is.
And he has weapons. He does have weapons with Terry Mack and Dotson, right? Terry Mack had a nice year again last year, 3 straight years over 1,050 yards, twice over 1,100 yards. And if the offensive line can just be competent, they should have enough, like the running backs should keep them honest enough to where you can't necessarily just play, like you can't just stack the box because the receivers should be good enough for one-on-one coverage. And then if you try to double them and you're not putting enough there to stop the run, like you said, Howell himself could also run.
Yeah.
So if they can work something out with their offensive line, they could be a feisty team. I could see myself playing this team week to week a bit later in the year. I just have a hard time locking anything in on them because I really don't know what to expect, right?
I mean, when you just kind of look at the roster, they have Brian Robinson, they have Antonio Gibson, good 1-2 crunch. Oh, yeah, and they drafted Chris Rodriguez, a kid from Kentucky. 3 good running backs in my eyes in the room. They have Dotson. Dotson had 35 receptions and 7 TD receptions. That's absolutely crazy as efficiency. Scary carry, elite number 1. Oh, yeah, and also you have Curtis Samuel, who was Deebo Samuel before Deebo was Deebo in that offense. But this offensive line, they did nothing to address it. This is one of the worst offensive lines in the game. They used 2 picks on interior guys that were low on my big board. I really think that this is going to be the team where if they did have a better offensive line, I'd be backing them. If they had the Giants offensive line, this would be my team I was backing. But it's a bottom 3 offensive line. They're really going to struggle to block for Howell. That also helps with his rushing props that we're going to be looking to bet. Defensively, you have Chase Young coming back from an ACL, fully healthy, playing for that big contract because they didn't give him that 5th-year extension, along with Payne, Allen, and Sweat. That's an elite 4 that's going to be able to Band-Aid any issues that could be in the back 4, even though the back 4 did look better the second half of the season. They brought in Barton from Seattle. Now you have a middle linebacker that can patrol the middle, clog the middle, drop back in coverage. That was something that was really lacking. Defensively, they're good. Offensively, they have weapons. Offensive line is just brutal. I'm doing nothing. I'll just be looking to bet Sam Howell props.
Eric, we have finished another NFC division, and now we will move along next week and talk about the NFC South, and we will preview that division on the Winning Ticket. We remind all of you that we will be back here on Friday, 6:00 p.m. Eastern time next week. And the schedule of the show for the next few weeks will still be the same way, where we'll talk a little Friday night baseball. Then we'll look ahead to some plays for Saturday, for Sunday. And then we'll finish up in the final segment talking NFC South. Eric, buddy, thanks so much. Again, it was great having you back this week, and we missed Jack Fitzpatrick. Hopefully the 3 of us can all be back together again next week. Remember, to everyone in the state of Iowa, go sign up right now for a DRF Sportsbook account and use that promo code FAST150 for a $150 deposit match bonus. We'll see you back here again next week, Friday, 6:00 p.m. Eastern time on the Winning Ticket.